let me just make sure that we are live streaming, which it looks like we are. Nice. Okay, cool. Hey everyone, I'm Nathan with CopilotKit. I'm the senior DevRel here, and I lead both of our communities for CopilotKit and AG-UI, and I will hand it over to Tyler.
Hey everyone, I'm Tyler. I'm a part of the founding team here at CopilotKit. Really excited to talk with you all today. I think it's going to be a pretty interesting session. A little bit informal, a little bit formal, but really excited to program with you guys today. And this is a online adaptation of a talk that we gave in person, actually. So if you were at that in-person event, shout out, welcome back. We'll be covering a lot of the similar things. Um, but yeah, that's it for me for now.
Shane, you're up.
Yeah, my name's
Thanks
Shane
for being
Thomas.
with us, by the way.
Yeah, well, I'm excited to be here. Always like to do, we like to do a lot of events with you all over there. So, I'm Shane. I'm one of the co-founders of Mastra. So many of you probably know what Mastra is. If you don't, it's an open source AI framework for building in TypeScript. And yeah, excited to answer any questions you have about Mastra and, hang out with everyone that's here.
Nice. Tyler, I'll hand it over to you. This is going to
Cool.
be a
Yeah,
fun
let's just
session.
get right into it then.
Yep.
Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen. I feel like that's the quote of the last 5 years is let me share my screen. Okay, welcome everyone. So today we're gonna be building a project management canvas using Mastra CopilotKit and facilitating that via AG-UI. A little bit about me, just to get us started. I'm pure-born open source developer through and through. In a past life, I was really into the open source ecosystem of Kubernetes. Now I find myself in the open source ecosystem, I guess that's forming around agents. So I guess I'll call it the agents open source space. Um, Going with that Kubernetes past life experience, I used to work at Oracle, Red Hat, and some other kind of smaller startups before this. But yeah, currently really excited about the agentic UX and a lot of what challenges kind of emerge when you're trying to do interesting things with agents and a lot of the challenges that come from a user experience of interacting with those agents. So what are we actually going to be doing today? We basically did our setup, like what we were just talking through, introductions, that sort of thing, getting the live streams working, all that good stuff. I'm going to do a quick demo of the project management canvas. Then we're going to talk a little bit about AGUI. We're going to build a Mastra agent. In this case, I'm not going to be live coding these things. I'm actually just going to be showing you the code that is existing live, and we'll talk through it. And then we'll bind that exact Mastra agent to an AGUI terminal session, so we can see all of the AGUI events funneling through Mastra, funneling from Mastra rather. And then we're going to give our agent some state. This is a newer concept I think that your team has been working on, Shane. It's structured working memory, or just working memory that also has structure to it. So a lot of this is actually built on top of that. And then we're going to be binding that agent to our React front end, and that's going to be where CopilotKit comes in. We'll do a little bit of a recap, some Q&A, and then wrap up with some kind of next steps. Okay, so this is what we're building towards. I'm just going to go ahead and show this off. This is the actual project itself. On the right-hand side, this is one of the pre-built components from CopilotKit, but CopilotKit spans a very large degree of customization, but at its core, it is UI infrastructure and plumbing for building agentic applications. So this is actually connected to a Mastra agent. A very simple example of what you want to do with a Mastra agent is chat with it. And we can chat with it and do some interesting things there. What we're actually This whole thing is built around structured working memory, but there's a lot of other concepts like generative UI, shared state. For example, another thing is front-end tool calls. So I think this is still there, but let me just check. Change the theme to purple. Yep. So this is what we call front-end tool calls. So basically what's happening here is AGI has this concept where you can transfer tool calls over the wire. And basically what this means is the handler is defined on the front end. The actual agent gets it bound in. In Monster's case, it gets bound into the LLM defined in the AI SDK. And then the model decides to call this tool, and CopilotKit handles the tool in the front end. So really what happened here, if we go and look at that code, I can actually show that off. I think it's what is the tool called? Theme color, set theme color. So this is what's called use Copilot action. And so really this is a hook that CopilotKit provides where you can define a tool call with a certain number of parameters and a handler. And then this actually gets bound in automatically through AG-UI to the Mastra agent. So that's what's happening with this front end tool call here. We also have this concept of generative UI. I just threw this in there just so we have something to look at. So I can say, get the weather in Charlotte and see. And it renders this component that is, based off of that tool call essentially. And if we look at what that actual code looks like, it's pretty simple. Basically, we have this weather tool, and I've actually edited this. We have a starter if you want to get started with this right now. This is all open source, this PM canvas. Nathan, if you wouldn't mind sharing that in the chat, that'd be great. Also, link our starter repo for Mastra, just so people can, get started and follow along if they want.
Definitely.
But basically, this is a different type of tool. This is rendering a tool that is defined in Mastra itself. So let's go ahead and get back to that. But I want to talk a little bit about shared state and what this demo is actually even doing. So let me go ahead and get this spun up. I'm just going to be typing for a little bit. But basically, what you can ask this agent to do is to plan some project. So a funny one that I usually do is we're building a new project, Food Eats. It's a food delivery app where the food is delivered by snakes. Please help me to scope out this project and assign work. So once I send this, we'll give it a second to kind of process. What's going to happen is that's going to be sent over the wire through AG-UI events. It's going to prompt with the Mastra agent to update its working memory. And right now it's telling us everything that it's doing. It said, here's everything that I want to do. You can see up here, it actually updated the name. So it named it to Foo Eats, and it's a food delivery app where the food is delivered by snakes. Gave us a bunch of things that we could potentially do in this project. Let's just give it kind of a green card. You can do all of these things. Let's do all of those. You do everything for me. And we'll give this a second to kind of iterate over. This is a very simple example, but you can do some things while it's loading here with CopilotKit and Mastra to give the user some kind of in the loop updates. You can do this through generative UI. You can do this through Mastra workflows, all of that good stuff. In this case, I lost my mouse. You can see that it added a collection of different things. So it added, design the user interface or develop the front end, develop the back end. And all of these users, they all have a description in the back ends. So let me go ahead and show you what the actual Mastra agent looks like now that we've looked at the demo a little bit. So
And Tyler, real quick, someone asked, maybe you could kind of zoom in a little bit. Someone asked if this is similar to Lovable or different entirely.
yeah, so Lovable is really what all of this is in service of is building Lovable for your domain, or building V0 for your domain, or Cursor for your domain. Building agentic experiences on top of agent frameworks like Mastra. And we're big fans of Mastra. And basically, you can take all of the Mastra stuff that you're building and actually ship it to your users in a UI in a way that's both compelling and engaging. So when you think about Lovable, what are some of the things that are really great about Lovable? One, it works. You can actually build things. That's great. Some other things that are kind of more subtle that you don't really think about as a user is it updates very often. It lets you know as things are actually happening in the system. It lets you know as progress is made. You can see the code stream in real time. These are some of the things that Lovable gets right if you're talking about Lovable. But really, this CopilotKit is the development UI framework for building Lovable, talking and backed by your agents. And then AG-UI is kind of this third piece, which is how Mastra sends all of its events to CopilotKit. So CopilotKit is what we call the React client, essentially. The React client consumes AG-UI events and displays them in kind of, a UI kit type of way. So all of the things that we see here, this was a tool call that got transferred over the wire from Mastra called, I think it's update working memory or something like that. And we're actually rendering it all of the, basically, these are all of the updates, the unstructured, this is the structured data that we're rendering here on the left-hand side. So if I then say, okay, Tyler finished all of their work, it's going to know that it's going to understand what that even means. It's going to use Mastra's working memory concept to go and update that. And then it's going to reflect that in our UI. So we can see here, all of my work actually got completed, right? So this is kind of what we're doing. We're building lovable, in this case, for project management, right? Like imagine how nice would it be if Linear had a Copilot attached to it. So you could say, just go plan all my stuff. I don't want to do that. That'd be awesome, right? That's kind of the whole concept of this, but it's very basic. I actually vibe coded this. The prompt that I vibe coded this with is actually inside of the repo itself. It's under snippets, under step 3, if you want to go look at the prompt that I used to program this. But it was basically, here's my data, go and build a project management Kanban board based off of it. Okay, so that's what we're building towards. I'm going to be kind of explaining the periphery around that in a structured way. I'm just going to skip over that. We all kind of are, I think, aware of Mastra, but maybe Shane, you could take this slide, just explain a little bit from Mastra's end, how you all visualize some of the key pieces of Mastra and some of the things that you feel you're doing differently or better in the
Yeah.
ecosystem right now.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the, we have our goal is to give a bunch of primitives, right? A bunch of tools that you can piece together. So when we think about Mastra, we think about, how deterministic is whatever you're trying to build. So that's why we have workflows, which are relatively, more graph-based, more deterministic, which you may call out to an LLM to you, for certain pieces. We have this concept or primitive of agents, which potentially could call a workflow or just call multiple tools. And then we even have, what we've recently released is called our agent network, which is a collection of or a team of agents that work together. So the idea is that you have a bunch of tools that you can piece together and architect really complex agentic systems to be whatever you need it to be. And we kind of get out of your way. We give you the tools and let you kind of build. So we have memory, agents with memory, workflow graphs. We have RAG, we have evals, we have a whole bunch of, we integrate with MCP, so you can bring your own, any tools from MCP that you might need, and all kind of bundled into a local playground experience. So you can test things, you can test out your agents and workflows as you build them, and then wire them up to your application when you're ready. And yeah, that's kind of the rough, real quick summary.
Yeah, awesome. I think there's a bunch of questions kind of flowing in. One thing, just as we're kind of going through this, we can tackle these now, but I think there's a QA section inside of Zoom that we might want to use here, just so that once we get to the QA section, we have a big backlog to go through. What do you think about that, Nathan?
Yeah, I think that works. We have a bunch of questions, but going forward, if people want to put in the question in the Q&A, then I can answer them live. We can also answer them as a group. So yeah, that
Yeah,
works.
cool. All right, so just if you want to have your question be like prioritized or seen, it'll be a lot more visible in that QA section. Otherwise, we'll kind of scroll through chat and answer kind of ad hoc.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm just going to move on a little bit. So AG-UI, I've said that a couple of times now. You might have heard about this in the ecosystem, you might not have. It's kind of an emerging thing that CopilotKit, the company, has been backing. It's an open source protocol that's basically trying to take, the M times N problem, which is you have M agents and you have N ways that you want to consume them. And, for example, in our situation here, we're consuming it via React, but what if we wanted to use this in Svelte or Angular or mobile, right? So what's nice is that AGI is a standard set of events that all of these different, what we call clients, can consume in a standardized way so that, if you're Mastra and you've integrated AGI or you've created a middleware, which we'll talk about in a little bit, that emits AGI events, then you can consume those events anywhere with any of the clients. So we'll actually see a little bit about that today, where all of that Mastra agent that we just looked at, we'll actually be able to interact with it through the terminal. And we'll get to some of the primitives here in a little bit. But at its core, how do we philosophically see AGI? Basically, it's an so open source is what that means. Lightweight and unopinionated. So it's just a set of 16 events. And we don't care how you send or receive or process those events. It's event-based, which I just, it's basically, you can see here on the diagram on the right, we have a run started event with a thread ID and a run ID. You can also have a resource ID. So Mastra has this concept of memory, and you can hook into that memory with, specifically referencing different pieces of memory using that resource ID. Then we get some of the things that the AG-UI protocol is really focused on, which is giving updates fast. So you can see that we have this text message start event. Then we have text message content coming through, and those are deltas, right? This is actually, throughout the entire protocol is deltas are front and center. So that, if you think about streaming state or you think about streaming messages, a very efficient way to do that is only send the updates, because models very often, or, streams are very often not sending all of the data every single time it updates. They're just sending the deltas. And that's what this protocol is kind of built around doing. Okay, and then yeah, it's for agent user interoperability, which we covered a little bit about, but what does that even mean? It's basically your agents gets consumed by your user where your user is. It's interoperable between Angular, mobile, SMS, all of that good stuff. And it's based on a kind of similar architecture to MCP, where you have a client and you have a server. A client consumes them, and a server produces the event. And in Mastra's case, what's happening is Mastra has their own, internal SDK that we hook into in the AG-UI integration, and we forward those events as AG-UI events out so that you can consume them, in any way that you want. So that's a little bit about AG-UI. When you think about MCP and A2A and AG-UI, there's actually, three kind of core protocols that are emerging right now. And we see AG-UI as being a piece of this, what we call three-leg table. So if you think about a table, it's really stable with four legs, but it kind of wobbles. It's very opt to wobble, but with three legs, it's actually, it's almost impossible, I think, to make a three-legged table wobble. But anyway, so we have MCP. MCP is how you get resources. It's how you get prompts. It's how you get tools. That's what MCP is for. And it's really a protocol for LLMs and a lot less a protocol for agents. It's for giving your LLMs context and your LLMs tools and your LLMs resources or PDFs, that sort of thing. A2A is kind of tangential to this. It's somewhat like AG-UI, but it's very focused around communication between agents. So if you think about two agents, they don't necessarily need to stream, for example. They just need to send the data once the data is ready. Maybe there's some streaming involved, maybe there's not. But that's where AG-UI comes in. AG-UI is hyper-focused on solving the user interactivity. How do you handle interrupts that are ongoing? So if you think about workflows, they can be paused for users' feedback. That's kind of one example. How do you interact with real-time updates of something that's going on in your system? That's really what AG-UI is tailored made for. And that's what CopilotKit is using under the hood. So a little bit about CopilotKit. We saw some of the code, but really there's two key pieces. There's our pre-built components or headless UI. In this case, we're using headless UI, or we're using a pre-built component called Copilot Chat. There's actually a typo here. This is supposed to be import Copilot Chat. But Copilot Chat, that's exactly what this is here on the right-hand side. It's a pre-built component for, sensible styles to get started with a lot of customizability that you can build on top of. And as you kind of scale away from that, you can build out your completely headless UI, just reading the raw AG-UI events and rendering them kind of how you want. And CopilotKit facilitates the communication and has a bunch of nice to use features on top of that. And then there's this other piece, which is use coagent. Use coagent is a hook that was born quite a long time ago when we were building our first, primitive concept of what agents look like in a UI. So, we had this thought, well, if you have a copilot, you might have a co-agent, right? That's why it's called co-agent. But really what you get from there is functionality for operating and reading your agents. So you can process your state, you can set your state, and all of this kind of just works in a reactive way. So in this case, we can JSON.stringify our state, or a much less novel way to do that, or a much more novel, I suppose, way to do that is to render it as this kind of Kanban board that we see here. So if we go and look at our working memory, this is all just structured JSON data that we used through the use coagent hook to render inside of our UI. Okay, so that's a little bit about CopilotKits. Let's start looking at some of the actual code. I do want to take some time to pause and answer any questions. Maybe if you want to raise your hand, we can answer some live. What do you think, Nathan?
Yeah, yeah, that's a good idea.
And I'm just going to scan through some of the questions that have already been proposed. Thanks for answering a couple already, Shane. Let's see.
There are some in the QA actually that we could like handle really quickly, which is um, when should we opt for use Copilot action and when for Mastra tools? So
Yeah. So use Copilot action is for defining either tools that you want to handle on the front end or rendering Mastra tools. It's one of the two, right? So if we look back to our example a second ago, where we got the weather, right? All the way, I guess, I think I reloaded the chat. Here, I'll reload it again. Get the weather in San Francisco. This tool right here is actually defined inside of our Mastra agent, and I'll show you exactly what that looks like. So inside of our agents, we have a couple of things going on. We'll touch on a few of these. But we also have these tools, and one of those is the weather tool. So let's go look at the weather tool. It's a very simple thing that isn't doing so much. Inside of our starter example, we have a much more complete example of the weather tool rendering results and all that stuff. But really all we're doing here is just taking a location and outputting to things like a temperature and condition. And then in the UI itself, we're just hooking into that and saying that this is basically we just want to render this tool on the front end, which is what available front end means. And we provided this weather card for actually rendering it, which you can see here. So the difference between use Copilot action is that you actually define the handler on the front end. It gets sent over the wire through AG-UI to the Mastra agent, bound into the LM, called it, but handled on the front end. So that's what this handler is actually doing. It's calling a hook for setting state of the current application, such that when we call it and I say set the theme to black, it actually updates that in our application. So that's the kind of difference between, you probably always want to use Copilot action, but you can either do that to define front end tool calls that get handled or rendered on the front end, or you want to render some backend Mastra tool. For example, something is that, rendering in progress, and a tool is being called. CopilotKit will allow you to render that in real time. So I'm just going to say that we answered that live.
yeah, and I did put it's called the with Mastra project, and so if you want to go check that out, you can see what Tyler's talking about the calling the weather API.
Yeah. So, yep, exactly. Another interesting one is how does CopilotKit handle queuing up multiple use Copilot actions at once? Let's say you have 100 Copilot actions. Are these triggering 100 API route calls into Mastra? No. So what happens is there's this kind of initial handshake that happens where the tools that are defined on the front end through the AG-UI protocol get batched and sent to the agent. And then the agent can just call those tools whenever it wants. When those tools are maybe updated, maybe you have something that's dynamically updating these use Copilot actions. That'll send an update to the agent to say like, hey, this has been updated, but it's not 100 API calls. It's one API call or n API calls where they're batched that get bound into the LLM, and then the LLM just decides out of its 100 tools that you've defined which one to call. Or if you're not even passing it to the LLM, just the LLM will decide, okay, I'm going to call my backend tool that's defined in Mastra, and it'll admit that it called that tool, and you'll render it in your UI through the use Copilot hook. So I'm just going to say I answered that one live. Are use coagents going to be possible with Mastra anytime soon? Use coagent is currently possible with Mastra right now. So yes, very soon. I can show you exactly what that looks like here. I'm using coagent to grab my weather's initial state, and I'm setting some initial state. In this case, I'm grabbing some users from my hypothetical fake database and some tasks as well. And that's what happens when we reload here. I haven't wired up threads right now. So when I reload this page, it goes back to its initial state, which is what you see here. Okay, cool. I'm going to go ahead and keep moving on. Yeah, so let's keep going on. So if you want to, follow along with everything that we're doing right now, we have a CLI that lets you get started very quickly with CopilotKit and Mastra. That with Mastra repo that Nathan linked earlier, that is actually using this CLI command is actually using that. So it's just create AG-UI app -- Mastra. And what that'll do is, scaffold out an application for you with a pretty simple, minimal example. Actually, what we've been looking at here, this was built on top of that. This is forked from that directly. So, feel free to follow along with that. And if you want to take a look at the CLI client I'm about to show off, you can do the exact same process, except select the CLI client, and that has native support for Mastra as well. So, okay, let's start to look at that CLI that I just mentioned. So I have this command in here, pm CLI. If you're following along, you've cloned the repo. This is just a package script that I've defined, which calls TSX on source CLI index.ts. But I'm just going to give a very quick demo. I can just talk with my Mastra agent. I can say hi. It'll respond. I can ask it to write a long poem. That's a pretty common thing to test LLMs. I said write something else, but you can see here what it decided to do is I'm going to create a long poem. It gave us some nice formatting and then wrote the long poem, and we can see this kind of stream in real time, right? So another thing we can do is we can also see tool calls happening. So if I ask it, get the weather again in SF, you can see that it actually called this, and this is rendering, the actual AG-UI primitive events here. These events are the same exact thing that we're using inside of our UI. We're just rendering them. So that was a little tool call result. I can also say, I have a new employee, Tyler Slayton, that is a software engineer. And it's going to we can see it update its working memory. So it calls that tool, update working memory. And then we can see the tool call result was a success. And we can see its response. There's a little bit of weird formatting here, but we can, take a look at what's actually happening under the hood. But then we see this state snapshot. So this state snapshot, if we get into our actual CLI now, is how Mastra sends its working memory for CopilotKit to render. So if we come into here, we can see that we have a very simple kind of TypeScript application. When we start it, we get that AG-UI chat started. We also load in from our .env the OpenAI API key, which I won't show you because I don't want to dox myself. But in here, we're using this prompt user, which is basically just, getting user input, pausing, and then sending that new message to the agent. So in this case, we're calling this agent. This is the Mastra agent. We're pushing a new message to it. And we're, we're assigning a random UUID with a role of user, and we're trimming it for, sanity. And then this is where we actually get into the AG-UI piece. So these are all the events that the AG-UI integration is going to emit, and we can decide what to do with any of these. So maybe we want to update the tool call result event, or what's a better one? We want to update the tool call events because we're looking through this and we see that there's some weird formatting going on here. I can add in, maybe a new line like this to all of our messages that are being emitted, so that we can just see that this is kind of happening in real time. All right, and then let's go ahead and run this and say get the weather in Charlotte. That's where I'm from. And we can see that this is now rendering in a little bit more of a easier to follow way. So we're calling this tool weather tool. Where is that actually happening? We can see tool call right here. So what is a tool call event? Well, it comes with an ID. This is, for model providers, this is how you know that this tool gets a response. So when we go look at the result event, we can see that also has an associative tool call ID. And, it has a result through the contents. And these are all the AG-UI types. And if you're curious about what all of them are, we can actually look at them inside of the AG-UI protocol schema. So we can go into events, and all of these on the right-hand side, these are all the events that make up CopilotKit, or sorry, that make up AG-UI. So, when a run starts, we can see exactly what we provide: a thread ID and a run ID, a base event. These are all based off of the base events, which has a type, a timestamp, and a raw event. The raw event is there for any kind of additional information. So let's say that the Mastra team has cooked up some new event that they want to add, or some new event for something new, some new feature, right? And that's not currently in the protocol, or sorry, in the integration. You would get that through the raw event because we just surfaced the raw event from Mastra. This is the kind of life cycle of events. We've seen this a little bit in a previous slide, but basically the run begins. we start a step. A step in this case for Mastra would be a workflow. So we've executed a certain piece of the workflow. For other kind of graph-based agents, that would be we're entering a new node, that sort of thing. Once that finishes, the run completes, and you kind of repeat this. Maybe a run finishes and an error occurs. You can surface that error through an error event. This is the run error event, which has a code and a message as well. These are all the events that make up AG-UI. If you want to go and get started and build your own kind of integration, so let's say that you want to build, or maybe you want to build a new client, right? You want to build something on top of the AG-UI protocol. Maybe you want to build an SMS client or something of the like. You could do that through all of our different quick starts. We have one for building applications, which lets you build what we're building right now with CopilotKit or a terminal or what have you. You can build a client. So that's a client is CopilotKit. If you want to go build a CopilotKit for whatever you want to use, this is the guide to go to. If you want to update the Mastra integration or build your own integration kind of from scratch, we have quick starts for natively emitting events or doing a middleware approach, which is where the events are coming through and get translated and then AG-UI gets sent out. So if you want to get started with any of those, it's all in our documentation page right now. But I do want to move forward a little bit because we're talking about these events. So, each event basically has a fall through type should you need anything more. So that's these special events down here at the bottom, for raw and custom. So maybe you have a raw event that you want to emit that isn't captured by the protocol. You can do that through raw. Or maybe you have a custom event that, you want to do something pretty custom. These are separate. Like raw events is, here is literally everything that I'm sending. You can handle it if you want or not. And custom is, I want something a bit more structured. And that's where you put in custom. And again, this is all delta-based performance. So you have text message start, the content. Same with state management. You have a state snapshot, state delta, and then a message snapshot. That's how you load threads and things like that. You send the messages snapshot. And yeah, we talked a little bit about AG-UI clients. So we were just looking at one, but let's look at a really simple one. So in the Mastra situation, we import a Mastra agent from the Mastra integration of AG-UI. We pass in our weather agents. We run it with a certain thread ID. And then we call, in this case, we just render a tool call result event. If there's content, we emit that content. Or if there's a message snapshot event, we get all of the messages. We render those messages as well in the terminal. So that's a very simple AG-UI client. And then a server is a little bit different. A server is where you're natively kind of emitting these events. This is a Python-based server here, where we're just yielding a run started event and a run finished event. Very, very simple. In our situation, we are doing something kind of similar where we're shipping. This allows you to ship to both your UI and a CLI and a mobile app. Basically, they're all just events from your agent. They're all standardized. Right now, we have TypeScript and Python SDKs built into AG-UI. We're also going to be doing the same thing for Rust and C# and Go and Nim. And we have some people working on a Swift one as well right now since this slide was created. Okay. And then we talked a little bit about the middleware. So just kind of recap where we are right now. We visualized kind of several AG-UI events. We interacted with our agent both through a UI and a CLI using the exact same agent. We didn't change the agent at all. And we took kind of a deep dive on some AG-UI events. And then, if you're following along inside of the Mastra PM Canvas application, I'm going to go to that really quickly. This is kind of set up in 3 branches. So there is step 1, step 2, and step 3. We're currently entering step 2. So everything that we're about to be talking about is, entering step 2. This is setting up structured memory in your Mastra agent, working with states, all that good stuff. So that's where we're entering right now. Take a little bit of a pause there, answer any questions, see if anyone's lost, anyone wants to come up to kind of raise their hand in chat. If not, we can continue. Nathan, any good questions?
Yeah, there was one question. So someone, it was anonymous in QA, so I don't know the name, but they asked if CopilotKit and Mastra workflows worked hand in hand. And a follow-up to that was, is there a way for CopilotKit to advance Mastra workflows from actions? So
Mastra workflows from actions. So Shane, correct me if I'm wrong. Workflows are not tool call based, are they? They're kind of own primitive inside of Mastra?
Yeah, they're their own primitive. We just released a blog post maybe earlier this week or late last week on some improved streaming. One of the things that we had a lot of people that were using CopilotKit or other tools and using Mastra was questions on how do you stream workflow events to the front end. And so we recently improved our streaming so it conforms to AG-UI. You can stream every step to the front end with CopilotKit. So you might need to use that new like streaming protocol to do that, but there's a whole blog post that talks about how that works. I'm not exactly sure what the advanced master workflows from actions necessarily means, so maybe we need a little more detail on that. But as far as using CopilotKit with workflows, you should be able to now use CopilotKit to trigger a workflow and display and stream those steps. They're not necessarily tool calls, but they're steps of a workflow to your front.
Yeah, that's exactly correct. So, going back to that, going back to the protocol primitives again, workflows are very analogous to these steps, to these step events. Let me just go and find those.
And Shane, was that the nested streaming support in Mastra blog you're talking about? Oh, you're
Oh,
muted.
you're muted, Jane.
Yes, that should
Okay,
be the one.
Great,
got
yeah.
it. I just posted it in the
Yeah.
chat for anyone who
And
wants to
for
check it
anyone that
out.
might have been using Mastra and CopilotKit recently, we released a new version this morning that adds support for, I think it came out like yesterday or 2 days ago for 13.1. There was a small issue in the integration that we fixed this morning. So all of the latest and greatest from the Mastra team you can use with CopilotKit as well, and the AG-UI integration for that matter. Yeah, so talking about workflows, these step events, if you want to go and look at the actual schema of the protocol, that's what these are actually emitting. Okay, so I'm just going to continue moving along. I do want to talk a little bit about structured working memory and how that integrates with CopilotKit and what that even means for CopilotKit and kind of why it's implemented this way. So how AGI emits state right now is there's this initial state transfer. So CopilotKit, when we set initial state, it'll send this state snapshot to the Mastra agent and set that through, if you want to think in Mastra primitives, it'll set that through the Mastra APIs through a update thread call. And now the thread will have this initial state snapshot and awareness of our canvas in our kind of demo application we were just looking at. So when I load this page and I see all of my nice little things like Tyler and the product, and I'm building the product right now, all of these things, that's the initial kind of state snapshot that we were just looking at. Then we have these kind of incremental updates, right? So right now in the Mastra integration, it's kind of all at once. So Mastra will update its working memory and then send a snapshot in the current implementation. We've been working on and experimenting on how we actually stream those in progress, so you can kind of get on progress updates. But that's what this loop that it's talking about here is, these state deltas. So this allows you to stream, structured pieces of state. The way it currently works is, when a run finishes, it sends a state snapshot. So when we finish calling the tool of updating the working memory, we will then update the state snapshot as well. So that's how it currently works. Let's take a look at the actual code now, though, for how we can define some structured working memory. All right, so Mastra has this primitive of memory. It's fantastic, big fan, because I think that memory is one of the most important things you can have with an agent. And I think it's one of the things that make agents really kind of wholly unique is good memory support. And Mastra has great support for a lot of this stuff. And one of those features that you have is working memory. So working memory allows for you to have these kind of blob style storage or Zod schema style storage. So you can either have one giant, markdown file of data, or you can actually have structured Zod data. In this case, we are using structured Zod data. We can actually go look at what our schema looks like. In this case, our schema is a project name, a project description, a collection of users, and a collection of tasks. And we infer the type for this inside of CopilotKit for type safety. One of the things that's really nice about Mastra is since it's TypeScript, it integrates really well with your TypeScript front ends. You can import all of the types and have a lot of type safety kind of end to end. Whereas, in a Python-based system, that is a lot harder to do. So what do these types look like? This is going to start to look a little bit familiar now that we're looking at our canvas. But we have a user schema, which has, an ID, a role, a name, an email, summary, and an image. In this case, the images are all from this website I found that has an API for generating images based off of initials. So these are all actually images right here from an API. And then we have some initial data. And this is what we pass when we initiate the transfer or when we initiate the call, that initial handshake that happens. This is actually what's happening is we're sending this kind of initial data here where we infer the type of the user schema and then build out a collection of these. So these are that's that API I mentioned where you can build an image based off of users' initials. Then we give kind of some summaries. So this is what the agent's reading in its memory. This is what it's aware of with our current project. So, it knows Tyler is a software engineer at CopilotKit that's good at building UI. And then we have another engineer, Suas, another part of our founding team. He is good at building backend systems. And we have a product manager through John. And it has awareness of all of these things. So when we ask it to, take a task, break it down into smaller pieces, and then assign those pieces out, this is what it's aware of. This is what it's doing to do all of those things. Yeah, and so we also have a set of initial tasks. So this is when we reload our UI every time. This is that initial kind of tasks that we're seeing there. Yeah, and then we just attach this schema into our actual Mastra agents. So we just attach the schema, and now Mastra is going to update some persisted memory in a structured way that we can render through tool calls. So, when we get something like, for example, let's say, actually, Tyler is now a PM too. I'll give that a second to kind of run. We can see that it's going to update this, and it called this tool get working or update working memory, I think is the tool call. And in this case, we're just rendering that. So if you want to see what that render looks like, that is inside of here. Update working memory. When it gets called, we just render this component, which in this case, JSON.stringifies our data and pre-renders it, which is what we end up seeing here. So what's really cool about Mastra's, working memory concept is it kind of works out of the box. You don't have to do anything too crazy from the start to get memory working. You just kind of give it a Zod schema, and the agent is going to kind of intelligently be able to do these things that you want it to do. So in this case, I said Tyler is a PM now too. And it was able to, say, okay, cool, I need to update my working memory to have that. It showed you what it did, and then it allows you to render it through that state snapshot into our UI, which you can see here. Yeah, so that's all of our Mastra agent now. We also have this prompt that says a couple of things. You're a product manager at CopilotKit. In your working memory, you have a list of users. I tell it to not mention working memory and instead just refer to it as updates to the board. I had this weird thing with the model where it really wanted me to give exactly what the tasks were. So I said, that's your job. You figure it out. So that's a lot of what this prompt is doing, but no kind of like magic happening there. Okay, and then to actually rendering the states, grabbing the states, we have this initial state that you provide. You say my project, this is your new project. If we go and look at our application, these are exactly what is updated inside of here. This set state is interesting. We don't use it in this demo, mainly because when I vibe coded this, I just didn't add in updates from the user. But this allows you to update this through button clicks. So the working memory of Mastra, you can programmatically update through your UI as well, which is what this set state allows you to do. And this is what we call shared state or use coagents. Is usually people will ask, does Mastra have support for use coagents? Because that's a primitive we had prior to our integration with Mastra. So the answer is yes, and it works exactly how it works with some of our previous integrations. And this is how you do bidirectional state updates. So this is for reading, this is for writing states. Yeah, so just to kind of recap what we talked about, we looked at and created a schema for our application. We took that schema and provided it to our actual agents and surfaced that state through the CLI client as well. So when we are looking at updates to state inside of our CLI, I can say add a new employee, Nathan, who is the lead dev rel at CopilotKit. we could see that state snapshot actually render inside of our UI here at the end of every run, which exactly is what this looks like here. Yeah, so that is kind of where we're at right now. If you are following along in the actual demo, we're entering into kind of step 3 now, where we're actually building our UI. So inside, I'm not going to do this so much, but inside of the Mastra PM canvas, I have this collection of snippets inside of here. So if you want to go and build your own kind of custom Kanban board, you can go into step 3 and there's this vibe code UI prompt. This is what I use to get the current UI that we're looking at. So all of this UI here was what is this? Like 25 characters, 263 bytes, we'll call it that since we're all programmers here. But it's very simple. You just say update this page. Here's what the data looks like. Here's the schema, and build it out. And in this case, this is what we got. So I think that gives us time to kind of start to wrap up. You've got a full stack agent. You have all the kind of tools you need to go and build a project management canvas with Mastra, with CopilotKit. The latest version we just released today is 0.0.8 of the integration. That's compatible with 0.13 stream of Mastra. So feel free to go use that. And yeah, now is the time for any questions.
Yeah, if anyone
Hold
wants
down your hand.
to ask their question live, if you want to ask Shane questions live, just raise your hand and we can bring you up.
Yeah, and I'm gonna stop sharing now, and now it's kind of community time. So please, guys, speak up. I'm just gonna be going through our previous chat as well, just to make sure we're not missing any questions there. Some funny ones in here. Sebastian asked if it's easy to build a dating app. I don't know. Go try. That'd be kind of interesting. Agent first dating app would be very interesting. I met my fiance through a dating app, so big fan, I guess.
Same here, actually.
Okay, so we answered that live. Done. I'm just gonna keep scrolling up through here. But if you have any questions, oh, we have one person raising their hand. Do you want to bring them up, Nathan?
Oh, yeah. Give me 1 second. Let me promote you. This will take like 5 seconds, so bear with us. Okay, Rainier, you are a panelist. Shoot away with your questions.
You muted yourself.
Thanks everyone for being here, by the way.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yeah,
Yes.
totally.
Yep.
Okay. So I'm using this camera here on the laptop. So I want to understand, like I saw like you guys can define tools on the front end, and somehow the agent on the back end he knows about these tools, and I think like I want to understand like how the agents on the back end they are getting these tools, and they know that they can execute the tools.
Yeah. So through the AG-UI integration, we are using the Mastra client and the Mastra API. Depending on, you can either embed your Mastra agent inside of the AG-UI integration itself, or you can do it over the wire through the network. In both situations, it's very similar. What's happening is the protocol of AG-UI itself has a user event for submitting a new tool that through the AG-UI integration automatically gets bound in to the LLM as you would do a normal tool, right? And CopilotKit has this kind of proxy layer that allows you to kind of lock those down. So if you have something that's, in like you don't really care so much about what actually gets into the agent, like user can go crazy, kind of do whatever they want, then you don't really need to do any like security auditing or anything like that. But say that you want to have these 4 tools that are defined in the front end and nothing else. CopilotKit's we call it our runtime. That runtime allows you to kind of prevent those things from getting into your actual agent. You can really lock down what tool calls actually get bound to it. But to answer your direct question, it's an AGUI primitive. And through the integration of AGUI, Mastra is automatically reading these tools essentially.
Yeah, and he knows like it is the front end who's gonna execute the tool.
Yes, yeah. The handler that gets provided to, I mean, if you want to get really into the details, the handler on the actual Mastra side is empty. So it needs to be handled on the front end. It's aware of all of these things.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Yeah. No.
Great. Awesome.
Awesome. Thanks
Thanks
for
for
Rainier.
All right. Let's just see. I'm just reading through some of our questions. I think we answered most of these already.
Let's
Um,
see.
oh,
Uh,
how far along is the REST SDK? I would say it's like 30% of the way done. If you do want to get involved, let us know. We're open to contributors with that one as well.
yeah, it is started, but I'm sure that the folks who are working on it wouldn't mind help. The PR has been open for about a week or so.
Hmm.
So yeah, anyone who wants to get started or even contribute at all, just reach out to me on Discord or Twitter, and I can point you in the right direction. We do have a contributing guide in AG-UI, so yeah, we'd love to, you know, get you onboarded. And speaking of contributors, by the way, there's a weekly working group that's tomorrow. If you go to CopilotKit's Luma calendar, you'll see it there. And
And that's an
it's,
AGI working group. That's
yes, yes.
we're operating it very similar to how MCP's kind of meetups work. It's where we discuss ongoing projects, issues with the protocol, make decisions, that sort of thing. So if you want to be a part of that process, please join us. We do have one person, Brandon, with their hand raised.
Yep, I'm
I
bringing
also
them up
see,
now.
yeah, while you're pulling Brandon in, I see one Mastra specific question
Okay.
from Pascal. Says Mastra question, Hono is used as a server. Will this in the future be configurable? Maybe be able to use just like server from Node. So no immediate plans to do that, but I will say we have a history of like picking one implementation and then eventually going back and making it configurable later. I would say you don't have to use the bundled Hono server though with Mastra. You can write your own and just pull in Mastra as a class and use it that way. So you do today technically have the flexibility to kind of use the Mastra class within your own server and implement it in that way. But then you're of course kind of responsible for building the API routes and whatever that you might use with your application. But it is technically possible.
Great. Yeah, love
And,
it.
and Brandon, this is a familiar face. I haven't talked to you for a while.
Hey guys. Yeah, I
Hey.
know, right? It's, I think it was the last interview you did with us on with the Mastra hackathon stuff and everything.
Yeah. Yeah, well, good to
Yeah,
see you
no.
again.
Yeah, good to see you guys. No, this has been cool. It's been cool to see how much progress you guys have made between Mastra and Copilot, especially with the state stuff and hooking in like use co-agent and so on. It looks like a lot's advanced. So no, this is exciting. I think my question was more around I saw some of the earlier workflow stuff, but I was just kind of curious to because we have if you set up a Maestro workflow, that's kind of forcing a specific flow. And so I was kind of curious about like the precedents of how this works with like actions and co-agents tying in with the state and so on. Because I assume, Master kind of wants to force you through that flow to keep your agent on kind of guardrails. So it's doing that. But then we have all these different hooks that are also tapping in. And so I was kind of curious to how that kind of gets enforced, like the Maestro workflow with all these other things going on.
Yeah, so with Copilot kits, there's a couple of things going on right now in terms of what we're doing. So we had a big push. I'm just going to give you the context and then the actual answer to your question. We had a big push towards getting state working with Mastra, and that was born out of that newer, I think it's a little bit older now, newer feature of structured working memory. So then what came is, okay, so now Mastra can emit workflow events through AGI. And now CopilotKit needs to render those. And so we're working on rendering those events right now. So if you go and you like load up your Mastra agents and you have your workflows, you'll notice those won't actually render how you expect in the UI. We kind of envision it by default looking like reasoning steps to some degree, where you can kind of see in progress, oh, I'm in this node doing this thing, or I'm in this workflow doing this thing. To answer your direct question, which is how do these hooks all kind of bind into that? The current way that we envision this is you have probably one of two kind of paths. And the new network stuff, we're gonna have to think a little bit harder about that one, because that's a little bit more emerging for us on the CopilotKit side. But there's this kind of supervisor pattern that's emerged from various partners in the ecosystem. With CopilotKit, all of these hooks for like binding and tools for like front end tool calls, those go to your supervisor agent, not your like we call them like subnodes, I guess, or workflows. We call them subnodes internally. Shane, what would you call each? Are they steps or are they workflows?
Yeah, we call them workflow steps, but yeah, they're
Okay.
essentially like nodes, but yeah, they're steps in a workflow.
Yeah, yeah. So in that situation, it will be bound into your like your root Mastra agent that potentially is calling these workflows. If you just have one workflow, that's a little bit of a different thing that we're still trying to kind of figure out is, okay, what happens when we have the capacity to run a workflow, but what does it actually look like for, binding in tools and all of that stuff? We're still kind of thinking through that. And then the third thing is this kind of, you have a ton of different entry points. You have this network of agents, this team of agents that exist. What does that mean for these hooks as well? But from a rendering perspective, these all function kind of similarly, which is you have events that are either streaming or they're tool calls, and CopilotKit will render those kind of in a way that I think is sensible by default and customizable to anything else that's not sensible. Does that answer your question, Brendan?
Yeah, somewhat. I guess just a follow up there is like, let's say that I'm in a certain workflow, or like you're saying, like a sub agent at some point with certain like would it be possible to have where certain hooks only work in those situations when you're in that workflow versus another one, if that makes sense?
It does. And I think that'll change. That'll take some work. I think Shane will probably have to talk on both of our sides to make that explicitly work. Something more
Yeah.
like being able to bind in tools through AG-UI into workflows themselves. It's not something that I think would work kind of by default. It's something that we'll have to think about a little bit harder on both of our sides.
Makes
Yeah,
sense. Okay.
yeah, yeah. I could totally see the use case where it might be able to, you know, by default, you can use a master tool as a step. So it's probably, we do need to think through it, but I think there's probably a path where you could envision a workflow step actually triggers a CopilotKit tool on the front end on the client. But certainly more discovery would have to be done there to figure out what we need to do.
Yeah, no, it seemed complicated, so that's why I was curious. But yeah, no, I'm excited for what you guys have put together. It's really coming along, even if it's like, more free for all right now with, hooks and all that tapping into the state and whatever. It's not as guided, from those workflows, but I think I think that's obviously where things will probably go just for
Yeah.
security sake and all that, and having a more structure. So.
Yeah, absolutely. We're thinking about that pretty heavily right now at CopilotKit. So I would say probably keep a finger to the pulse on all this stuff, and we'll keep you updated.
Cool. Sounds good. Awesome. Thanks, guys.
Thanks,
Awesome.
Brendan.
Thanks, Brandon. Cool. We are at the top of the hour. Um, Shane, what's the best place for, folks to get started with Mastra or kind of dive into, the nitty-gritty and go deep within the agent framework? Where can you send them?
Yeah, I mean, you can go to Mastra AI and get started there. We have a Discord, the link is on our website. So if you do have questions along the way, please jump into our Discord and ask us. We have a hackathon going on right now for building Mastra templates, which are an easy way to get started with. If you want to see example agents and workflows for different use cases, you can install a template. And we're having a hackathon to try to get more community-driven, community-built templates. So a lot of cool things going on. The website and of course like our social media, whether it's Mastra_AI on X or so all those channels. We are around. So please come hang out with us.
Yeah.
Awesome. And
Cool.
I put the AG-UI Discord link in the chat. It's up a few messages now, but since we are ending the stream, please reach out to each one of us directly, Nathan and Tyler, and then also join Mastra's Discord as well. So, all right, guys, appreciate everyone being here. Thank you, Shane, again for your time and graciously joining us to answer the questions about Mastra and hanging out with us. So we appreciate it, and we're signing off. Thanks,
See y'all.
everyone.
Cool. See you, everyone. Thanks.
Thanks.